I always get really nervous when I do things like this, and it's really weird because I spend all of my time teaching people who have just come out of prison and murderers, drug addicts, you name it, and I'm never nervous. So not comparing you to a room full of criminals or whatever. Sorry. Anyway, I have my lesson plan. Done my lesson plan for today. I am not going to set any aims and objectives. I'm sure you'll be glad to know. But I do want to tell you my topic. My topic today is my wildest dreams. Excuse me if I get a bit emotional, because I often do. But my wildest dreams, and quite honestly, never in my wildest dreams would I ever imagine that I would be stood in the Senate, of all places, sharing a bit of my story. And I got that sort of started me thinking about my life today. And never in my wildest dreams would I be the husband of a Welsh princess, a father to a beautiful daughter, a teacher and a mentor. Because there was two main mistakes I've made in my life, and two very big mistakes. And the first one was when I was 12-year-old, and I was coming back from school, having been bullied again, and I was offered a drink. I was offered a drink of cider at 12 years old, and the second biggest mistake in my life was a few years later when somebody offered me heroin as a way to deal with the alcohol problem. And never in my wildest dreams back then, in fact only a few years ago, could I imagine a life without heroin or alcohol. And a few years ago, when I was sitting in the shop doorway in London, in the West End, what was it called now? Blackwell's bookshop, where I was begging. And I used to sit in that same begging spot every day, and I would look at the world going by, and I would dream, I would daydream as the people were going by, and I'd look and I would dream about having a life like all these people that I saw walking by. There'd be fathers, there'd be mothers, there'd be families, there'd be people going to work, living a life. What I considered they all were normal. I thought it was all normal people, and I know today that there isn't really any, is there? So, but that was my dream. I'd look out on all these people doing this. But then a miracle happened. A miracle happened in that after 18 years on and off the streets, I was put in a place in Truro, and I forget the name of it now, but it was like a halfway house. And in there, I had my first taste of adult education, further learning, just enrolling on a few little courses here and there. But the main miracle that happened was that I was invited to a study skills weekend at Coleg Harlech, and that led to a place, and that led me to come into this beautiful country with funny place names, but a beautiful language that I endeavoured to learn. And that was the start of the journey to my new life. And just reflecting on Coleg Harlech, it really was an amazing place. It was from every single person in Coleg Harlech cared, whether that was the principal, the people in the canteen, the cleaner, Kerry. She used to come round and check you were all right, you know. And every single person cared. And it was at Coleg Harlech that the seeds, the real seeds to my new life were sown. Because at last I knew that there was a hope. I knew that I could have a new life. And it started there. But the staff were amazing, you know, but then the teachers were something else. And the teachers there, they were, for the first time in my life, I felt I was inspired, I was motivated, but I was also challenged. And that was important as well, that I was challenged. My old way of thinking was challenged, my negative thinking was challenged. And that started a nice journey then into Bangor University. I went to Bangor University in 2008, and I would love to say that my relationship with heroin had ended, but it hadn't. I relapsed in 2008, and true to my old form, I jumped on a train. Second year of university, I jumped on a train back to London, back to the West End, back to that very same shop doorway, and started begging again. I threw it all away. But there was a chap that used to come and visit me every night, and he was a Reverend, Julian Davis, and he used to come and see me every night. And the reason he used to come and see me, and he told me he doesn't do this for everybody, but he'd remembered me from a few years before. He'd remembered me being on the streets, and he walked up to me and he said, "You don't belong here anymore." And I knew in my heart that he was right. I didn't belong there. So I told him about the story, about going to Harlech, and I told him about getting to university and about relapsing, and I told him everything, and I said, "I've blown it, I've walked away from it all, I've ruined it." And he said, "Well, there may be a chance." And a couple of days later, he came back and he had a piece of paper in his hand, and it was a letter. It was a printout of an email from Student Services in Bangor, who I knew very well because I was always in there. And it simply said, "Tell Scott all is forgiven to come home." So he paid for my train ticket back up to Bangor University. By this time, I was really, really bad on back on the heroin. But the university arranged for a drug counsellor for me, and they arranged something I'd never had, interesting enough, over the years. I'd never had any sort of intervention like that. I'd been in prison, but in the community, I'd never actually been given a drug counsellor or any sort of mentor. So I ended up getting this chap, and it was really interesting, really, because my first drug counsellor was actually somebody I was at university with, so that was really weird. I was on the same course as him. But anyway, he got me into rehab in Colwyn Bay in 18th of the 8th, 2008, I went into the rehab. Whilst in rehab, back into education again. Just like that woman, I was like a sponge, loved it. But unfortunately, it only lasted 2 months. 2 months I lasted, and went into KFC one day, and I bumped into an old drug dealer, and they said, well done, you've done 2 months. Have something to celebrate. And I walked all the way back to the rehab with it in my hand, and I had this battle going on in my brain saying, the good, the bad, and I walked all the way back, and I used it. But I always say, you've got to take this the right way I say it, it was the best bag of heroin I have ever had, because it was my last. It was the one it was the one that brought me to my knees, and it was the one that made me realise, do you know what? There is another life. There is another life. So with that in, I went and told the staff. I told them I admitted I'd done wrong. And they said, thank you very much for your honesty, but we're going to have to ask you to leave because you've brought drugs into the house, and rightly so. I put the lives of 21 other addicts at risk. So, but they said, for your honesty, we're going to give you 28 days. We're not going to ask you to leave straight away. So they gave me 28 days, and in that 28 days, I threw myself back into education. I went on courses, and then I went on one course, and I met this teacher on there, and just like that lady there, there was one teacher, and she said to me, she said, you could do this. I said, do what? And she said, you could teach. I was like, don't be silly, And she said, why don't you think about it? And I was like, oh, maybe. So I started at the probation service helping a lad who was on a probation order for alcohol problems, and he told me he couldn't read and write, so they gave me a job as a volunteer helping him read and write. And I saw him about 6 months later in Rill, and he walked towards me and he recognised me, and I said, you can read and write, can't you? And he went, how could you tell? And I said, you kept scribbling on your notepad when we were talking, but he was trying to get out of his order. But hey-ho, So anyway, just upon leaving the rehab, it was a funny time because I always call it my limbo land time. And it was the time when My old identity, I love that this is about identity today as well. You mentioned, didn't you, identity. My old identity was really challenged then when I came out because I desperately didn't want to go back to my old society. I desperately didn't want to, I couldn't go back that way, but I desperately wanted to be over here in society. I wanted to be a member of society again, having been out of it for virtually all my adult life. So it was my limbo land. So, I've lost my place now, sorry. It's because I can't read my handwriting. All these years in adult education and I still can't write clearly, but that's okay. So anyway, this year, I will be 9 years clean. This year, I'll be 9 years clean. And most of the point, thank you very much. Yeah, 9 years clean. And I qualified as a teacher in 2015, I think. And I have the privilege today. I run a little organisation called 428 Training, but I also do a lot of teaching for Adult Learning Wales. And it's really weird because Adult Learning Wales, WA Cymru, whatever the identity at the time, has been a part of the journey the whole way, from as being a learner to becoming a teacher, to doing my IVing for me now, and further professional practice. It's been there all the way. In fact, I can't get rid of you. So anyway, not far off now. Right. Along my way, while I've been writing courses, I came across two questions that really struck a chord with me. And the two questions that I believe people in life struggle with and wrestle with all the way through life. And them two questions are, who am I and what is my purpose? And that really struck a chord with me because that's all it was for me. Who am I? And the identity that I developed, the identity that I had become over them years. I was addict. I was a heroin addict. I was a crackhead. I was an alcoholic. I was an offender, a criminal, an ex-offender. All these labels that I'd put on myself and society put on me. But today, because of adult education, because of adult learning, and being given the space and the opportunity to develop as a person, I can stand here today, a husband, a father, a son, and a teacher. And they're labels that I don't mind wearing. I don't mind wearing them ones at all. So just to close, some may have heard me say this before, but life is a journey for us all. And we must never underestimate the part that adult education and learning plays in changing lives, because it is, after all, in the renewing of the mind that true transformation takes place. So I want to thank you. I want to say diolch yn fawr to Wales for welcoming me, and Adult Learning Wales and all the partners, not only for changing my life, but for the privilege of playing a part of the education of the people that I teach today for you. So, diolch yn fawr, thank you very much.